So welcome to the How to Pass Your Recording and Mixing Project with Style video. It's just a lot of sort of Pro Tools chops that are going to help you and are going to make things much easier for you in the long run. First things first, what we're going to call the file? Well, we're going to call it by our name, our surname first. So like this, Massey Ian, and then recording project. Okay, so on the day we'll get that. Oops, let's spell it right. On the day we'll get that correct, and we'll tell you where to save it as well, because there'll be an external hard drive for that. So it's 48K of a sample rate and 24-bit as a bit depth. This is automatically going into this HNC sound production folder. I'm happy with that just now. Click on create. When we're starting, we need to set the playback engine. It's the really important thing here. The playback engine determines which audio interface is being utilized. For these studios, Studio 1 and 2, we need the playback engine to be set to HDX. If it is not set to HDX and set to Pro Tools aggregate or built-in input or something like that, it is wrong. It has to say HDX. Always check this before your session. If it says HDX, that's fine. Click on OK. If it doesn't say HDX, then select it from the list and then click on OK and reboot Pro Tools. Otherwise, you ain't going to record a thing. So we've created our session. As you can see, it's called Massey Ian Recording Project. Now we have to set up for the drum recording. Again, most of you know this already, but let's just verify what you're doing. First thing you're doing is you're creating a series of new tracks. We'll go for 8 tracks just now. So we can either go to the track menu and select new, or we can hold down Shift and Command and press N, and we get the track menu window up. So we're going to create 8 new mono audio tracks. Audio tracks come from microphones, and click on create. Like that. Okay, we're also now going to call these, name them for our instruments, which we can do very easily and very quickly. So I'll do a wee time lapse on this. There we go. So we've named all our tracks. Now in the comments section, we're going to put what microphone we've utilized in that as well, please. Again, this is a really good tip, and it's going to help with just the storing of all this data. So in the comments, double click on it and type what microphone you have used. Audix D6. Again, I'll do a little bit of time lapse on this so you can see it happening. There we go. So we've named all we've put in comments. We could put even more in there. We could put in positioned 2 inches from batter head. Something like that. The more information, the better. 32 inches. No, it's a couple of feet. Nearly 3 feet, in fact. So the more information we put in there, the better, and this is good. Okay, now here's another quick tip. If you don't know this, again, you need to learn this. It's how to toggle between the mix window and the edit window. So we hit Command and equals, and we go to the mix window. Oh. Now what we're going to do is set up the click. Let's do that. So we'll go to the track menu and select Create Click. There is my click track. My click track will come in at the same tempo here as is determined by the internal metronome. Okay, now we need to set that up through the headphones, so let's just create a headphone send on that. So where it says sends, not inserts, sends, we select that and we select output and we go down to headphones. We need to make all the headphone sends pre-fade, so make sure you hit the pre-fade, and notice this little arrow here turns blue when it's pre-fade and it's white when it's post-fade. Okay, it's important that it's pre-fade, and then if the fader's not turned up, turn it up. Turn it up at least to unity. Then ask your drummer if they can hear it. Here's the click. Oh, it's annoying, right? Now, being pre-fade, we can turn it down here, but you'll notice it's still going through to the headphone send. Okay? This is a good indication that this control is just for our monitoring, because you can see the signal still there, even though the fader is down. Okay? If that wasn't pre-fade, all of a sudden, because this fader's down, it's post-fade now, the signal is not going to the headphones, so make sure your headphone send is pre-fade. If the drummer needs to turn it up, then turn it up, okay? When the drums are playing, it's important that it's loud enough to overcome the acoustic sound of the drum, so it might need to be really, really loud in these headphones. I'll press stop now. So I've pressed stop, so we no longer have the click playing. Now, Problem is, that's not very indicative there about what we want. So I'm going to show you how to display the faders of the headphone sends. Before I do that, I'm actually going to assign the headphone sends for all of the drum tracks. Now to do this, I'm going to use the Alt click option. So Alt or Option, if we hold that down whilst we're making a single selection, what Alt or Option means is do to all. So just holding down that one key means that it's done it to absolutely every single one of these outputs. Now you'll also notice that they're not pre-fade because the only one that's pre-fade is the one that we set before. If I hold down Alt and click on the pre-fade button, they all become pre-fade, all right? So that's all very well and good. And the problem now is that I will get these little headphone windows up for each one of these, and it's very unindicative apart from the fact that that's telling you that it's Tom 2 up there. It's much better if we can display the faders here. To display the faders, that for some reason you always forget this, to display these faders on the blue arrow here, hold down the Command key and press with the mouse, and we get the headphone sends up. And now we can send sounds of the actual instruments down into the headphones. The drummer probably won't want this, but if you've got guitar and bass happening at the same time in the live rooms, then you'll need to do this so that the guitarist or bass player can hear the drums and not just trying to hear them acoustically through the windows, which is a disaster. Okay? So, all good so far. Okay, the other thing we may have to do is set the tempo. Not all songs are going to be 120 beats per minute. So to set the tempo, we just use this little triangle on the tempo part of the timeline, double click on that, and you get a tempo change box coming up, dialog box. So I've gone for 108 this time. Okay, so the whole thing is now changed to 108 beats per minute. We can also go to the events list and select tempo operations, and there's your tempo operations window. At bar 1, make the tempo 120 again, for example, and click and apply. In the interim though, I do find that just clicking that little triangle is the quickest way of changing the tempo. Okay, so just remember that and make sure that your drummer, everybody's happy with the tempo before you start your recording, because if you don't, going back and changing the tempo once you made your recording is possible, but it's going to be an absolute nightmare. So the next set of functions I'm going to show you are related to when we're a little bit further down the line. So let's say we're about to record a vocal. You can see here we have the backing track. So we've got the drums here on these 8 channels, then the bass, then we've got 2 electric piano tracks here. Now what we want to do is we want to send a mix of that backing track to the headphones of the singer. I'm actually just going to get rid of the click track. We don't need the click track anymore because all the information is already in there for rhythm so that the singer can sing along with it. Okay, so we've got all this. Now, if we say to the singer, oh, okay, have a listen to this. And we say to the singer, is there anything you want? So, I want a little bit more bass, or need a little bit more drums. By going back and individually changing all of these, it's going to take a while. So one of the best things we can do is actually use a submix here. And to use a submix, I'm actually going to use a couple of different functions. It's a set of really useful functions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all of these headphone sends. I know it sounds controversial, but let's just do it. So if I hold down Alt or Option and click on No Send, then all the headphone sends disappear. Okay, I'll also hold down Command and get rid of that assignment display. I'll bring that back in a second just so you can see what's happening. Now what I do is I have to assign all of these outputs to an auxiliary track. Now, there's a very simple way of doing this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these just now. There is method in my madness. Okay, and I'm going to do to all selected. So you may remember this. Hold down Shift and Alt Option, and then we go output and select new track, like that. So selecting a new track, we're just going to call this backing submix, like this. Oops. And it's an auxiliary input track, and it's going to be stereo. So click and create, and there is my auxiliary input track stereo. Now you notice that all of the outputs of all of these tracks have now changed to be called an output called backing submix, and the input of this auxiliary track is backing submix. So watch what I can do now when I hit play. So the entire backing track is now controlled by a single stereo fader. That also means that if I now go up here and create a headphone send from this submix track, and of course make it pre-fade, Another notification, hit Command and hit the blue arrow. Now that headphone send is going to send the signal down the headphones of the entire mix, and it's what I'm listening to here that is going through the submix. I can also turn this totally off, but you'll notice the submix is still going to the headphones. That means I can monitor the vocal an awful lot clearer because I can hear it without the backing track on it. How useful is that? Now all we do is create a new track for the vocal. So let's create a new track. We just want a single mono vocal track, and I'm just going to show you another useful thing here for doing backing vocals and things. Okay, let's call it lead vocal. There we go. So this new track is called lead vocal, and we'll set up a headphone send for this as well. Now this headphone send is entirely separate from this one. So now we've got, if the singer says, can I get more vocal? Turn down the backing track, then it will sound as though they've got a little bit more vocal, but you can turn it up for them as well. And also that is totally independent of this backing track submix, because the output of the vocal is going to the same place as the submix output. I hope that isn't too confusing. Okay, the other thing the vocalist might want is a little bit of a reverb. So I'm just going to go to, I'll just use reverb. Okay, so here's reverb. I'm going to turn it down to about 2 seconds or so, but the important thing here is that we turn the mix down, because when we use reverb like this, the mix is way too high. So probably need to turn it down to below 20% for it to work in this particular instance. Okay, now having set up this vocal track, you might then want to do some subsequent backing vocals with the same singer. So the easiest thing, rather than creating a new track and setting up a headphone send and a reverb send on this, is just to copy the track. So click on the track, right click on it, and select duplicate. Select everything except the active playlist and click on OK, and then we've got another track that's identical to the first vocal track, and we can put our backing vocal down on it. Just remember to turn off the record enables for each of the tracks as you go along, otherwise you'll potentially wipe over what was there before. Really useful technique. So submix your backing track and then use that as your headphone sends. Set up a headphone track, set up a vocal track with reverb and with a headphone send, and then use the duplicate function to save yourself some time and set up the next track. Okay, back in the edit window now, we're just going to look at a couple of things to make your life simpler in here as well. The first one is the zoom function. Now we can just use the zoom function like this and just click on the arrow and zoom back and forth to display what you want to see. But we can also use the R and T keys. Now I use R for retract, which means zoom out, and T right next to it for telescope, so zoom in. Okay, so if you're using a telescope, you're making things look bigger, so you're zooming in. If you're using R, you're retracting, you're moving out. Okay, but you can just click on these arrows and expand or contract or telescope the window using those as well. Okay, to be honest with you, the click with the arrow is my favorite technique, but I know Davey likes to use R and T. The other thing is, at the moment we can't see every single track on the window, because I've got, if you scroll down here, you'll see I've got my vocals down here, and I've got the auxiliary tracks there for the and the 2 lead vocal tracks that I made a couple of minutes ago. They're all there, but I can't see them all on the screen at the same time. I'm actually going to erase the lead vocal tracks because I don't need those ones there, because I've now got the recorded lead vocal track. Delete. Like that. Okay, so I want to display all of these tracks on the screen simultaneously. At the moment I can't. Again, I could go to each one and go make that one mini, make that one mini, or I could go hold down Alt Option and select make mini or micro. But see, I've got an awful lot of real estate down here that I'm just not using if I do that. So what to do is, on one track, hold down Alt Option, click on the track and go fit to window, and that means that every single track will take up as much space as possible within the available window space. So that's a really useful function as well. And then I'll just retract out a wee bit, or telescope in a wee bit, or use my arrows to zoom in and to zoom out. Right, memory locations. I'm going to put in a series of memory locations or markers that are very useful for navigating your project. I'm going to put them in on the fly, show you how to do that. So we do on the fly just means you do it as this track is actually playing. So I'll play the track. Here's my countdown. 1, 2, 3, 4. I probably don't need a marker at the start. I'll put a marker in the first verse. so the first verse is coming up now. Now to put in a marker, all we do is hit the enter button. Here we go. And so just type in verse 1. Okay, like that. And click on OK. And we'll do this fairly frequently. I'm going to go to the next bit, which I'm calling the bridge. This bit here. 2, 3, 4, enter. Bridge 1. Click return. Okay, and then we go around and round and round. See what I mean by on the fly? So it's just as the track plays along. You get the idea. I may do a little time lapse on this and just skip through. Okay, now that's all very well and good, but why are these useful? They're useful for navigating. So let's say I say to you, okay, we're going to do a take of a keyboard part of the first bridge. So if I go to the Windows menu and select memory locations, you see all those memory locations that I put in there are now up here. So I'm going to click on bridge and it jumps to that automatically. Jump to chorus. Jump to the first verse. You're just clicking on the memory locations, and it's a very simple, very useful way of navigating around. Okay, even you could create a drop-in point. So if I wanted to do a drop-in just before this doo-doo vocal. I have to go 'cause I love them so. Okay. Okay, so that means I can go to the same drop-in point every time. So I do my drop-in 1. Then I go back again, just click on it again. And do my second drop in, for example. Okay, very, very useful memory locations. Okay, so now we're going to perform a drop in or a punch in. A punch in is very important in the recording scheme of things, and I think you have to perform one for your exam. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop in some vocals around about here. So I'm going to put in a backing vocal part. So I'm just going to take my vocal track and I'm going to duplicate it the way that I showed you earlier on. To duplicate the track, just turn off the active playlist. So all the settings from that track are now going to be on the duplicated track. I'm going to turn the input for this track into the input of this microphone, which is that one there. Hit record and all of a sudden you can see it coming up. And I've got reverb on it. Reverb. There we go. And I can mute it. And I can solo it and all the usual things. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 little back-in vocal bits here in this track, and we'll use the drop-in function. So drop-in function, go up to the record button and right-click on it and select quick punch. Okay, so punch in, it's called punch in. Now we have the track selected, so at the moment if I hit play, I have to go 'cause I love them so. It's still record enabled, and what that means is at this point, the point that I want the punch in to start, I just click the record enable button. Okay, so let's just do that. I'm giving myself what's called pre-roll, so I need to run into the track. So I'll do this first with these 3 tracks and then we'll do it with something else. Here we go. I have to go 'cause I love them so. Okay, so there's take 1. I'm just going to go and duplicate that track. Duplicate. Fine. Like that. Record disable that and record enable that. So it's, again, you can see this is my second track now is active. So we'll go to the same point to drop in. We could have actually had the drop in point saved as a memory location. So hit play, and then when you want to start recording, just hit P. I have to go 'cause I love them so. Getting the idea? Okay, let's do the final vocal on that. So once again, just duplicate that vocal track like that. And once again, we'll just record enable that track, and then we'll just do the drop in again. So play. I have to go 'cause I love them so. Okay, I'm doing the wrong part there, so let's record over that then. I think it's that one there, isn't it? It should be in the middle part. Okay, here we go. I have to go 'cause I love them so. There you are. So the finished result is. So now I'm going to perform a punch in on a pre-recorded part. So I'll do it on this vocal part, this lead vocal part. I want to erase this bit here. So let's have a listen to what it sounds like. Then my only worry was for Chris. Okay, the word worry, that's just annoying. So let's just replace that section there. So I need to give myself a little bit of preload. So I'm going to start from here. So just click and play, and when we want the drop in to start, then just hit the P button, the record button, which has got the quick punch function enabled. Okay, so we'll hear the end of the previous section, then I'll hit on record enable. Was a little nappy-headed boy. And record. Then my only worry was for Christmas what would be my toy. And stop, or I could have pressed punch out again. Okay, so now we've got that in there. Then my only worry was for Christmas what would be my toy. There we are. So I've dropped in and effectively replaced that little section there. The best thing to do if you've got like a continuous part, a guitar part, or a bass part or something, is just have the person play along. And then you just do the punch in. You just click record when they're not even expecting it. Just play over the mistake, and then either hit punch out again or hit stop. Okay, I'll do that again. This time I'll hit punch out rather than stopping the recording. So let's take it from the same place, and I'll just do the recording again. Was a little nappy-headed boy, and drop in here. Then my only worry was for Christmas what would be my toy. And punch out. Simple as that. Then we can go back and audition it and just have a wee listen to it. Then my only worry was for Christmas what would be my toy. Still a bit breathy and worry, but we won't worry about that. Do you see what I did there? Okay, and I'm going to show you playlist record. So playlist record, we've set a backing vocal track here. I'm just going to record this little bit of backing vocal here and make a decision about which take that I want. So whenever we're using a playlist, the playlist is it's a number of takes, and then we can promote parts from the playlist from each of the takes into the actual track. I'm going to turn the click back on for this because everything cuts out at this moment, so I'll need to hear that. Oh, that's loud. Okay, so let's just make sure the click isn't quite so loud. Cause I love them so. Okay, so that's what I want to do here. I'm just going to do this doo-doo vocal, as I call it. Okay. So, first recording will be the first take, as it is. So just make the first recording. I have to go because I love them so. Okay, so there's a take. Now, we want a new playlist on this. So what I'm going to do is just create a new playlist. So I go to the backing vocal track and click on this little disclosure arrow here and select new, and we create a new playlist, and the previous one disappears. Don't panic, it's still in the computer's memory. Let's do a second take. You might have noticed that first take I did, it was a little bit sluggish. It wasn't quite in time with the click. So let's do a second take. I have to go because I love them so. Okay, so that's take two. I'll do a third take. Now this time, rather than going here and clicking and selecting new, what I'll do is I'll use the shortcut. The shortcut this time is Control and backslash, and we get a new playlist coming up like that, and click on OK. So we'll do exactly the same thing again and have a listen. I have to go because I love them so. Oops, let's try recording it. Okay, let's just give me a bit of pre-roll. Here we go. I have to go because I love them so. So there, that's my third take. I'm just going to edit that one back very slightly, like that. There we go. Now, to look at my playlist, rather than saying waveform, I select playlists. And now I can see the other two takes as well. I need to create a new playlist, so I'll just go Control backspace to create another playlist to drop the previous takes down. Okay, so now I can listen to each of these from this place just by hitting solo. So here is the first take. Okay, and the second take from here. Okay, I kind of like that second bit there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that second bit there, and I'm going to promote it by clicking that arrow there. Bosh, and it's done. Okay, then I'll take the first phrase from the last take and just promote that there. So, oops, sorry, there we go. So now we can listen to those two takes together. I have to go 'cause I love them so. Okay, so that's playlist record. Really, really handy function. Really handy, especially if you're doing things like guitar solos. You can take a million takes of a guitar solo or a lead vocal. I tend to use it in a lead vocal all the time. Maybe do 3, maybe 4 takes of the vocal and then use individual sections from each of the vocals if there isn't one take that's perfect, which is rare, let's face it. That is playlist record. So the next tips are going to be based on the main edit window. The first one is the timeline and your playback selection. So at the moment, it'll play back from this point here, bar 44. 'Cause I love them so. Okay, which means that if I wanted to start from, say, the bridge, it's not going to do it. It's not moving anywhere. Or if I stop and start again, it's just going to carry on playing for where it is. Now that's because we don't have this little function here, and if we hover over that, it says a link timeline and edit selection. If that's not selected, then that will happen. So now with that selected, blue, that means that wherever I click, that's where the song will play from, which is extremely useful. So that's another very useful tip. Okay, now we're going to have a quick look at groups. Groups very useful in both mixing and tracking situations for reasons that will become obvious. So here I want to make a selection on my drums. Say I want to edit this 4-bar section, sorry. No, 8-bar section, I was right the first time. So I've got an 8-bar section here, selected it in the kick drum. Now to select that in the snare drum, I then have to go down to snare, hold shift and click, then on the hi-hat shift and click, and what a pain in the backside. Okay, if I create a group, then that'll happen automatically. So to create a group, we just have to select the instruments that are in the group first. So click on kick, the nameplate, then just go down to the last overhead, hold down shift and click on its nameplate, and you see the entire drum kit is now selected. Nothing beyond the drum kit, the bass isn't selected, the electric piano, nothing else is selected, just the kit. Now, to create a group, we just go Command G for group, dead simple, and here's our group. I'm going to give this the name drums, and actually another little trick is I'm going to take this and I'm going to call it ID D for drums. I tend to do this, it's just a habit, it's quite a useful way of getting around. D for drums, G for guitars, K for keys, V for vocals, etc. It's an ID that just makes navigation later on a little bit better. So click on OK. And now when I do exactly the same thing and click on the bass drum, you see it selects absolutely everything. So that now means that I've got everything selected in that kick for an edit. So if I press Command E to edit that, then I could delete that 8-bar section. So now I've got a section where the drums cut out. 3, 4. Okay, kind of a remix trick there as well. So let's Command Z it to bring it all back. There she comes back. Okay. And there's a number of things I can do with that, having them as a group. So if we go to the mixer, my Command equals, mute the drums, like that, single mute. I notice as well the faders are all linked. So with a single fader I can make the whole drum kit louder or quieter, which you might like, you might not. I also have this set up just now, so record enable is all set for them, as is the input monitor. Okay, you hear the lovely phasing happening when I did that. The pans, however, are not connected. You'd have to go into the under the bonnet a little bit in order to connect the pan controls. But to be honest with you, there's no real reason to connect the pan controls. That's just a little by the by. If you need to center something, you need to center a pan control, hold down Alt and click on it and it'll center it, okay? Then you can put it back to where you want. Similarly with a fader, if I wanted this back-end vocal fader to be unit again, hold down Alt and click on the fader, and that takes it back up to that point. So a couple of useful things there. Groups, certainly very useful. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do a fade in and a fade out using the Smart tool. The Smart tool is these three tools here linked together. When we click the bar above them, they link together. So we have the Trim tool, the Selector tool, and the Grabber tool. If we move to the waveform, if we're above the 0 line, then it becomes the Selector, like that. If we are below the 0 line, it becomes the Grabber tool, and if we're at the edge of the file, it becomes the Trim tool. And the Trim tool will change direction depending on where you put it, to the left of the line or back. So at the moment, that's trimming the previous file back. When we go, so the C is facing the right way, then it's trimming the actual active audio file forward. But you'll also notice if you moved about here, just this upper part, and sort of halfway across the line, you get this little box with a sort of shadow across it. This is our fade tool. So to create a fade in on this bass part, all I have to do now is, when that tool is active, just click and drag. Oops, that's doing a fade out. That's really useful. We want to do a fade in, so we want you to see the grey boxes on the bottom quarter like that. That's it. So I've now got a fade in happening on the bass part. Let's just play that so you hear that happening. So that's fading in, fading in. Very useful. We go to the end of the bass part, okay? Rather than doing a fade in using a fader, we could actually just decide that we're going to fade out from a point like this. Now, we have to create an edit point to actually fade out from, so I'll just create one there by hitting Command and E. And now what I'm going to do is, that's looking for fade in, there's a fade out there. So let's just put a fade out at that point there. And that's it, just fading away nicely. And you could affect that same length of fade. I'm using Grid Edit as well, so it's a very, very precise fade length over any of the tracks. So the last thing we need to do is save a copy in. Now you have to do this to back up your file, but all the files need to be off of the main computer hard drive anyway, for security reasons. You don't want somebody else nicking your file. So we're just going to use the save a copy in function. Massively useful. To do this, we just go to the file menu and we select a save copy in. This dialog box comes up. It's really important here that we select audio files, okay? And what this will do is this will gather everything related to your project into one simple single folder that can be moved around, and it takes all the audio files. Your audio files should be in the same place anyway, but sometimes for various reasons they might end up somewhere else. Once you've selected that, just click on OK, and then tell it where you want it to save it. So it's going to be called Copy of Ian's I Wish, and there'd be an external hard drive here, and I'll just put this one onto the desktop without going into this particular folder. So there's the desktop. Additional hard drives will appear in this drop down menu here. Click on Save, and then what we'll do is I'll just close this down and I'll show you we've got a folder now, and within that folder you will find both a Pro Tools file and all of the audio files that I've created for this project. That now means that I can take this anywhere. That folder contains the entire project and is by far the best way of moving things around. So that's save a copy in. Do this at the end of your exam before you power off.